The third day of Mahindra Global Chess League is here. Again, we have 3 matches. Defending Continental Kings versus Fire Americans, Alpine Airship Pipers, Grandmasters, and Ganges Grandmasters versus Alaska Knights. I mean, you can see the scores, but let's find out who managed to win, who managed to help their team climb up the standings. And we start by taking a look at Firouzja, who is, I mean, absolutely on a good freaking streak. He has won the first 2 games, and now he's looking to extend his dominance against Hikaru Nakamura. Alireza is not in the candidates, but of course we would love to see him there. But yeah, Vincent is not in the candidates either, are STUNS, so hopefully in the next cycle we will see more youngsters like Alireza, because I mean it's time for them to just, you know, take their role, take their space in the elite and try to compete for the World Chess Championship match. So d5, c4, Queen's Gambit, and Hikaru accepts it. e4, knight f6, pawn goes to e5, knight d5, and now bishop c4. And now we'll see a very exciting line. So knight goes to c3, knight b6, and now e6. I'm not sure if Hikaru forgot about something, because apparently knight b4 here is the main move, while knight b6 is sort of like, you know, not the very best option, just because there is e6. The point is, if knight c4, which was played in the game first, you give queen a4 check, and after knight blocks, you don't take here immediately, because then bishop, I think just f takes e6 actually, and then it would be fine. First you take with check, king f7, and then you take on c4 with check again, and after e6 you have a better pawn structure. Knight f3, knight g5 is coming, and Alireza goes for it. h6, just to make sure nobody jumps to g5. Bishop f4, bishop d6, bishop goes back, rook f8 castle, king g8, rook f e1, king h8, rook e3, and now knight e4. The plan for Hikaru is that, okay, he wants this bishop, not for Hikaru, for Alireza, he wants this bishop to take this knight so that this pawn will become weakness forever. Rook goes to d8, knight goes to c5, takes, and now he kinda cemented himself a crucial e5 square, because let's say knight e5, bishop e5, and even in opposite colored bishop middle game, it might be very inconvenient for Hikaru to defend, just because there's so many ideas on these diagonals. So king goes to h7, h3 is played, queen f7 is a mistake according to computer, rook e1 is a miss. I mean, computer says, let's say queen b3 attacking the pawn, and suddenly there are not too many good ways to protect that. But okay, we'll move forward. h3, king f7, rook e1, rook d5, and now b4. The idea is to play b5, slide the knight to e5, and suddenly there are some problems with development for black. And after king d7 and just a lot of space, knight d4, rook d4, and they transpose to more or less equal position. I mean, this weakness on e6 doesn't really matter. And potentially black even wants to go, let's say, black rook d5 and try to put pressure on c5 and b5 pawns. King c3, rook d3, even more trades on the board, and after queen a5 it turns out okay. Suddenly some problems with c7 pawn, rook protects, bishop c7, bishop e4, and you know, if white are not careful for one move, there might be some bishop g2 ideas. So bishop goes back just to protect, because let's say, I think after simple bishop d6 I would consider bishop g2, and suddenly the position is completely lost, just because this is coming, and if king g2 there is simple queen f3, queen f2 is coming, and checkmate is about to follow. So bishop g3 is very precise move, just because after bishop g2, queen f3, king g1, there is no way to capture this pawn f2, because it is protected by the bishop. So bishop goes back to d5, king b4, queen goes to c2, queen b1, tries to trade the queen, and after takes, guess what? Alireza is up a pawn, and his position is completely winning, despite this position being with opposite colored bishops. But again, he still needs to convert. Bishop d6, bishop e6, and now c6, just because the pawn is extremely strong. And after e6, rook e1, Hikaru admitted his loss, because now there is no good way to actually, you know, protect this bishop, because king f7, let's say rook e6, and then king e6, c8, and you win a rook and win the game. So if rook d6, the same pattern happens, and if rook d1, king h2, guess what? queen is about to promote, rook e8, king f7, c8, and white are playing upper rook. So there was no good way to stop rook e8. If bishop d7, I mean, you again probably can play rook e7, and again, no good way to stop the pawn from being promoted. If rook d6, rook d7, d7, c8, and once again you pick up this piece, and if, let's say, bishop c8, you can play rook e8, king f7, this, rook d6, and rook f8, king f8, c8, pick up on f5, and win the game. And Alireza is winning the third game in a row, and I mean, many people are right now speculating that, you know, this guy is not in the candidates. I mean, he is just in a great shape. I don't know, and his team kind of keeps winning, but that, as you might see, didn't happen. 8-10, and Hikaru's team ended up winning by the effort of other players. So we move on to the second match played between Alpine SG Pipers and Upgrade Mamba Masters, who actually won the first two games. So it's very interesting whether they can make it in a row, but as you can see, they couldn't. And one of the heroes was Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, but it, again, didn't really help his team. But let's see what happened. So e4, c5, and we have Najdorf on the board. Knight f6, knight c3, a6, e5. g3 Najdorf is somewhat, let's say, sideline. I played it with white pieces myself in some of the overboard chess games when I was younger, and I played it recently just because, I mean, my main move is h3, and I decided, okay, let's try to actually get something off prep to get my opponent off prep. So I'll play this, and I actually do the same thing against even stronger opponents because they know what I'm gonna play. So I try to kind of surprise them early on. Bishop b7, bishop g2. They go b5, a4, b4, knight d5, takes, rook a7. That's actually a very familiar position to myself because I think it's an Anish Giri's course, and I recently went through it. So yes, very familiar. Even though I haven't seen queen a5 move in that course, so that is something that Anish should probably need to work on because I don't remember seeing it. Maybe I have to check the files again. Okay, takes, and we transpose to the endgame where, I mean, it's equal. There is no light square bishop to attack this pawn on e6. This pawn blocks c2 and b2. So, yes, I mean, I would probably say it's should be around equal, but there is a big but, this a5 pawn. And this a5 pawn is a huge weakness because rook b5, and then we're trying to take it. King a7, bishop c7, rook b8, king a6, knight a7, and now pushes d5. d5 is one of the most important moves in all Najdorf setups because, I mean, if you play d5, you generally should be in a good spot. In d2 h4, unless of course, I mean, you blunder something by playing d5 because there are a lot of tactics with it. f6, f4, takes, rook h8, bishop b8, knight e7, knight c6, knight a5 finally picks up a pawn. And now Maxime is getting a winning advantage. g6, rook h3, takes, king f7 to kind of disallow all g5 tricks, and now knight f5. The idea is, of course, to attack the rook, but there is rook e3, knight f3, rook e7. The idea of knight g4 now comes to mind. King a6, k1, king f7, and Maxime doesn't, of course, go for a draw, being up a pawn in the endgame. g5, f5, knight d5, bishop g6, rook h1. So Fabi is basically trying to create some counterplay because that's his only chance. If he stays passive, he's gonna for sure lose the game. Knight goes to f3, and now after king 8, bishop f6, f4, suddenly it turns out that this pawn is being pushed forward. Rook e1, rook d1 was a mistake because of knight c7, and white would have holded the game, but after knight b6, which is a blunder, bishop f5 takes, knight e5, knight c8, f3, and guess what? There is no good way to stop the pawn because even after rook g6, f2, oh, what rook g6 am I talking about? Because knight g6, I mean, there's just no good ways. Knight d6 doesn't work, rook e7 check, I mean, you can play king d8, and after rook e5 you can play f2, and how are you gonna stop this one? And even if you, let's say, I mean, there's just no way to stop it. Rook f5 is your best chance, but I mean, what it's gonna do? You promote a queen and win the game. So Maxime is on fire. And then we had a battle of two Indian legends, Vishy, Anand, and Gukesh Dommaraju. You know, there are a lot of memes where, you know, it's from Ninja Turtles, you know, Vishy in the middle, a splinter, and then he leads all these Ninja Turtles. Gukesh, Prague, Erigasi, Vidit. so on and so forth. And Bishop with white pieces. Gukesh, who is not having a good tournament, he made a draw with Hikaru, then he lost to Alireza, and now he's playing against an old veteran. Bishop, at the same time, I think he lost the first 2 games, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he lost to Maxime, he lost to Fabi, and now he is looking towards actually bouncing back and try to get a win against world champ. Knight of e6, d4 takes, knight d4 a6, and now c4, immediately taking advantage of the center. Marozzi formations in the Sicilian is generally good. King d3, king c7, bishop e2, knight c6, takes, pawn goes to a3, h3, castle, rook d8, queen goes to a3, bishop e5, rook d1, trying to trade. And this position is more or less equal, but I really like how Vishy managed to put this pawn chain. Bishop potentially goes to b2, I mean, the 4 ideas, he generally has more space. Queen e5, knight c3, a5, rook b1, takes, king goes back to c7. Now e5 was a slight mistake, but I don't think it's a big deal. Computer says knight a4 with knight b6 idea was extremely strong, but okay, e5, knight d5, king d4, f6, f4, bishop e8, bishop g4, and suddenly there are some weaknesses to deal on e6. So f5 was played, bishop f3, and at this point it looks like there are not too many ways for white to break through. So the idea is potentially to maybe trade on d5 and play b5, and then try to open b file, maybe try to play g4 and shake the king side. So bishop e2, g5. Gukesh chose to do it himself. So he was like, Vishy is not playing for anything, so I'll play g5 myself. Rook a1, king c8, bishop b3, king g7, king h2, king b8, king c3, king d8, takes, and now bishop d4. And as you might see by looking at the evil bar, the world champ is in slight trouble. Rook c8, that was a crucial mistake, because after rook a7, I mean, you have a lot of problems. Bishop c6 doesn't work due to b5, and then rook b7 position collapses, and how are you gonna protect this pawn? King c7 was played, bishop a6, another pin on the board, and bishop c6, b5. I mean, just absolute brilliance. Bishop b7 as well. I mean, what a move. Bishop b7. There is c6. Rook is protected. This is under attack. This bishop has nowhere to go. Rook b7 was coming, and you know it is tough to play. Rook c7. Bishop c6. Brilliant. Rook sacrifice. The point is that b6 and these 2 plots are just insanely strong. g4. Trying to create counterplay. Trying to create mate in France, but it is too late. c7. c8. And after bishop e6, Gukesh resigns the game, and Vishy first win of the tournament and the win against current world chess champion. And by the way, Vishy won. And guess what? Sindarov Javokhir, who is on the same team as Vishy, was playing against Leinier, Dominguez. And let's see what happens. So c4, c5, knight of knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, 4 knights, English opening, d5 takes, bishop g2, knight c7, that's actually quite common, g6, h4, queen b3, queen b7, all theory, queen b3 goes back, rook b8 attacking the queen, and bishop e6. So the plan for black, yes, they sacrifice the pawn, but at the same time they get a lot of activity. Guess what? Now bishop b3 is an absolute serious threat, because the queen is almost trapped on d1. So queen a4, bishop d7, queen d1, bishop e6, and now d3. Finally, Javokhir is like, no, I'm gonna play for a win, I don't want to make a draw. You play bishop d3, I don't care. So knight d4 was played instead, knight d4, takes, and knight goes to e4. Bishop b3, queen d2, f5, knight g5, h6, knight h3. Yes, Javokhir kinda let his opponent take some edge, but at the same time the game continues. e5, goes castle, and f4. So the idea of f4 is just to make sure you break the whole center apart. What I don't like about f4 is that you weak d5 e3 square, and then knight jumps to d5, and suddenly, I mean, you gotta always be careful with e3 square. Knight f3, takes, rook c1, bishop d5, takes, and now white suddenly has advantage. So bishop d5 was a mistake. Computer says bishop f7 was a lot better, just because you don't trade bishops off the board. And yeah, I mean, they're just, bishop d5 looks logical as well, just because you maybe want to trade, I mean, this knight against this beautiful bishop. So it kind of makes sense, but at the same time, d takes e5 takes, and after b4, this pawn is not under attack. Knight f4 is coming, and the position might not be as, you know, as good for black. King goes to g6, queen d1, king h7, takes, and queen b3, and suddenly Javokhir takes advantage, and his position becomes winning, and he has 5 minutes advantage on the clock as well. Rook c7, king g2, takes, rook f3, and suddenly turns out that also if your pawn is in a lot of trouble. So b5, queen f7, queen a7, and now guess what? How do you protect? No way. Takes, king f3, king f2, king f5, and he basically admitted his loss just because queen trade is almost forced, because if you move queen anywhere on the board, queen h8 would be folded. I mean, queen f8, I mean, you can just play f5, you can play queen g5, f5, doesn't matter, and you win the game. So, we have Ganges Grandmasters defeating PBG Alaskan Knights, who, again, I mean, crushed absolutely with no chance. And I think they're absolutely like dead last in the standings. We can actually check if it's the case. Yes, I mean, they're last by far. Some of the teams have already gained some points, while, yes, Gukesh has to wake up because he doesn't have a lot of time. Because they gotta start winning some games, and it doesn't look like their team is actually, you know, doing good job. While Triveni Continental Kings, led by Alireza Firouzja, is leading the event, we also have Ganges Grandmasters, we also have Upgrade Mamba Masters and Fire American Gambits, who all have 6 points. So it becomes close, it becomes interesting. Just a lot of exciting chess is coming up in the next couple of days. Hope you enjoyed this recap. Let me know any feedback you might have. I'll see you tomorrow after the next round. Bye-bye.